Welcome back, guys. So we are going to start our cylinder project. How we're going to build our cylinder is out of all kinds of different coils. You will need a few things. You need your slip, you need a scoring tool, you need some clay that's been wedged, you need a circle stencil to help us decide on the circumference of our cylinder. You don't want anything too small, because if it's too small, it's hard to get your fingers inside to be able to form and move and smooth stuff out. You don't want anything too big, because anything too big gets a little wonky. It's easier to break and fall apart. It's harder to move. A good rule of thumb is about the size of your palm if you don't have something like a stencil that at easy access. Something else that is really good to have is a piece of canvas. If you don't have a piece of canvas, you can use a piece of plastic, a paper towel, just something so we don't let the clay get super stuck to the table. Because as we work and press and form, the clay can get stuck. And that is the worst feeling when you've worked so hard on something and then it gets stuck to the table. So we're gonna work on a canvas to stop that from happening. The way that we're gonna get started is we have our fresh clay that we have wedged all the air bubbles out of. Remember, when we wedge, we push the clay in on itself. We don't fold it over. So it's wedged and ready to go. So I am going now to smack the clay and pinch and form it so it's thinner. A good usually rule of thumb that we want to stick to with clay is you don't want to make anything thicker than your finger. If it's thicker than your finger, it's going to take a really long time to dry. Also, you have the issue of like there's more space, there's easier to have air bubbles in it and you not know about it, and air bubbles are clay's worst enemy. So it's better just to keep things not thin, but definitely on the thinner side. So I'm pushing and moving the clay so it gets the right thinness. Use your finger to actually check if that's helpful. So I have a pretty nice smooth piece. You can use your canvas, make sure, over. I just want to make sure that it's about even all the way through. So it is. So now I'm going to use my stencil. I use my needle tool to cut around it. Take that off. Clean up my little boogers. So that's a little thick still, so I'm gonna pinch it out again, just so I get it a little thinner, just because there's too much clay, then your piece gets really heavy. So it's more effort for you and your teacher and the kiln. So all I'm doing is flattening it. As you can tell, I'm flattening it. I'm moving it around to make sure that I do the same thing to all sides. So now I've made it bigger because I've made it flatter. So I'm gonna use my stencil again. Sometimes it won't happen the first time, and that's okay. You just gotta try again. The beauty of clay is if something doesn't work out perfectly, you just squish it up, try again. It's very forgiving. Throw away that, this. Okay, that is a much more manageable thickness for my clay. So now I have my base of my cylinder. I'm gonna move that off to the side for a second so I can work on some coils. I have more wedged clay here, ready to go. So once again, I'm going to start off with my cylindrical piece. And I'm gonna start rolling. As you can tell, I'm getting my fingers all the way from the tips all the way to the butt of my palm. So if your coil gets pretty long and it gets kind of wonky and hard to deal with, not a big deal. Snap it in half, move that one to the side, so then you have more room to continue working with your coils. So I'm making sure that my coils are pretty even throughout. If you want, you can make, not all of your coils, but you can make some prior to starting, just so you don't have to start and stop. I wouldn't try to make all of your coils for your project and then keep them. There's a better chance they will dry out. And nobody wants a dry, crusty coil. So, but I am gonna roll a few just to get us started. Move these off to the side. So, as you can see, my clay is flopping right now. Sometimes your clay, from putting pressure on it, will want to go more into a square shape. If that's the case, it's not a big deal. You just tap out the square points and make it more circular. So that got it right back into shape. Once again, it gets a little long, you snap it in half. And you keep rolling. Notice my hands are moving all over the coil. They are not staying in the same place. I am not pushing hard. I'm letting just my hands roll over the clay from tip of my finger to the butt of my palm, the entire thing. So I'm going to move this coil to the side, finish off this one, and then we're going to get started. So there are a bunch of different ways that we can coil this vessel. Also, if you get a little dry, crusty in there, not a big deal, just pull it out, throw it off to the side. I have that thin part, so I'm just gonna remove, and I'm good to go. Okay, so there are a bunch of different coil techniques you can do. As you make your piece, think about the fact that you can incorporate small balls throughout your piece. Once again, do not make your balls thicker than your finger thickness because they will take forever to dry. Also air bubbles. So you have little balls. Think about how you can incorporate squiggles into your piece. Also, if you'll notice, sometimes after working with the clay for a while, or if it's a little dry, they can get cracks in them. If it cracks too much, you want to just toss the clay and get fresh clay. That just means it's been a little overworked and all the water's been sucked from it. So you can do a squiggle. Think about if you would want to put balls in between your squiggles. That looks nice. You can also do zigzags. So you can actually make it a physical point each way. You can make a spiral. So to do a spiral, we have to do our first little bit of scoring and slipping. So you can start with your coil. You're gonna make little X's all the way down your coil. So I do this by going one way and then I go back the other way and complete my little X's. So if you look, I'm not cutting into the clay super far, but it definitely is making an indentation. So you do want to physically score the clay. It helps the water, the slip, create the most consistent water content throughout the clay so that it dries at the same speed, which then lets it adhere and form properly. So now I'm just gonna use my finger. I'm gonna run the slip along my X's. I don't wanna put a whole bunch, but I definitely do wanna put enough to where it's noticeable it's there. I'm gonna clean off my hands, and then I'm just gonna roll it up. So now you have a pretty squiggle. And as you can see, the slip is pushing out a little bit. That's what you want. That's how you know if you have enough slip, is if your slip is pushing out from in between your two pieces of clay, kind of like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich when you squish it together, how the PB&J just kind of squishes out the side. That's what you want. That's how you know that you've gotten it totally full and ready to go.